The highway stretched out like a black ribbon under the moonless sky, and Sarah Martinez gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles had gone white an hour ago. The check engine light had been blinking for the past 20 miles, and now the temperature gauge was creeping into the red zone. She knew she should pull over, but out here, in the middle of nowhere between Barstow and Las Vegas, stopping felt more dangerous than pushing forward. Her phone sat useless in the cup holder. No signal. Of course there wasn't. This desolate stretch of Route 95 was notorious for dead zones. Something she'd forgotten when she'd decided to take the shortcut home to Henderson. Stupid. So incredibly stupid. In the back seat, her daughter Emma slept peacefully, her small chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm only children seem to master. 6 years old and completely trusting that Mom would get them home safe. That trust felt like a weight on Sarah's shoulders tonight, heavier than usual. The car made a sound then, a grinding whine that came from somewhere deep in the engine. Sarah's heart dropped. She'd put off the maintenance for months now. Between working double shifts at the diner and trying to keep up with Emma's medical bills from last year's pneumonia, there simply hadn't been money for things like oil changes and transmission fluid. She told herself it could wait one more month. Just one more month. That month had apparently run out. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then the power just died. The steering went stiff in her hands as the car coasted, slower and slower, until Sarah managed to guide it onto the narrow shoulder. The silence that followed was absolute and terrifying. Sarah sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, trying to control her breathing. Don't panic. Don't wake Emma. Think. She tried the ignition. Nothing. Not even a click. The dashboard was completely dark. Outside, the desert night pressed against the windows like something alive. She'd grown up in Nevada, knew the desert wasn't empty the way people thought. There were things out here. Coyotes. Snakes. And worse than animals, sometimes there were people who had no business being anywhere near civilization. Sarah pulled out her phone again, held it up, waved it around hoping for even one bar of signal. Nothing. She was 23 miles from the last gas station they'd passed, according to the odometer. She had no idea how far to the next town. The smart thing would be to stay in the car until morning. Lock the doors, keep Emma safe and warm, wait for daylight when surely someone would pass by. But Sarah knew from her waitressing job that this road was barely used at night. The truckers took I-15. The tourists took the main highways. This route was for locals trying to shave off 20 minutes. And at 2 in the morning, there weren't many of those. She looked back at Emma. Her daughter's blonde hair was messy across her face, and she clutched her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hopscotch, against her chest. In sleep, she looked even younger than 6. Innocent. Completely dependent. Sarah had been on her own since Emma's father walked out when she was 3 months pregnant. No child support, no help, just gone like he'd never existed. Her parents had offered to let her move back home, but home was a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 other siblings still living there. Sarah had decided she'd rather struggle alone than be a burden. Pride, maybe. Stupidity, definitely. Working at Ruby's Diner paid enough for a tiny apartment in Henderson and kept food on the table, but there was never anything extra. Never savings. Never a cushion for emergencies like this. A sound made her freeze. Rumbling. Deep and getting closer. Sarah's first instinct was relief. Someone was coming. Help. But then she remembered where she was, how late it was, how vulnerable she and Emma were out here. She clicked the lock button, then checked it again to be sure. The rumbling grew louder, and then she saw lights in her rearview mirror. Not car lights. Multiple lights moving in formation. Motorcycles. Her stomach twisted. She'd heard stories. Everyone in Nevada had heard stories about motorcycle gangs, about what happened to people who broke down in the wrong place at the wrong time. Her coworker Linda had a cousin whose friend supposedly knew someone who'd gone missing after their car broke down on a desert road. They'd found the car weeks later, stripped and abandoned. The motorcycles slowed as they approached. Sarah could see them clearly now in her side mirror. Big bikes, at least 8 of them. The riders were large men in leather vests, and even in the darkness she could see patches on their backs, though she couldn't make out what they said. They pulled up alongside her car, engines rumbling like thunder, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her hand moved to Emma, ready to shield her, protect her, though she had no idea what she could actually do against 8 bikers in the middle of nowhere. The lead rider, a massive man with a gray beard that reached his chest, killed his engine. One by one, the others did the same. The silence that followed felt worse than the noise. Sarah's phone buzzed suddenly in her hand, making her jump. 1 bar of signal had appeared, probably boosted by being closer to whatever cell tower these guys had come from. Her finger hovered over the emergency call button. The bearded man swung off his bike and started walking toward her car. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew no one would dare challenge him. Sarah pressed Emma down lower in the back seat, hoping she'd stay asleep, hoping they'd just pass by, hoping for anything except what seemed about to happen. The man knocked on her window. Not aggressive, just a firm tap. But Sarah didn't move. Couldn't move. He knocked again, then made a rolling motion with his hand. Roll down the window. Every instinct screamed at her not to, but what choice did she have? If she didn't comply, would that make things worse? Her mind raced through scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. With a shaking hand, Sarah rolled down the window about 2 inches, just enough to hear him. "You okay, ma'am?" His voice was surprisingly gentle, with a slight southern drawl. "Saw you coasting to a stop back there. Engine trouble?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "You got someone coming to help you? AAA, maybe?" She shook her head. The man looked back at his companions, then back at her. "That's not good. This road doesn't see much traffic this time of night. When's the last time a car passed you?" I don't know. Before we broke down. Maybe 45 minutes. He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed what he already knew. "Where you headed?" "Henderson. That's still 60 miles out." He glanced at the back seat, and Sarah saw his expression change when he spotted Emma. Something softened in his weathered face. "You got a kid back there?" "My daughter. She's sleeping." "Yeah, I can see that." He straightened up, and Sarah heard him talking to the other riders, though she couldn't make out the words. Then he crouched down to window level again. "Look, I know this probably isn't what you want to hear, and I know we probably look scary as hell, but you can't stay out here. It's not safe. We're heading to Vegas, but we can get you to the next town, at least get you somewhere with a phone signal and maybe a mechanic." Sarah's mouth went dry. We'll be fine. Thank you. We'll just wait until morning." "Ma'am, with respect, that's not smart. It gets cold out here at night, and you don't have heat without the engine running. Plus," he hesitated, "this stretch has had some problems lately. People getting robbed. Couple weeks ago, someone got hurt pretty bad. We'd feel a hell of a lot better knowing you and your little girl got somewhere safe. Was this a trick? Were they setting her up?" But something in his tone, in the genuine concern in his eyes, made her pause. "I don't have money for a tow," she said quietly. "I can barely afford to fix whatever's wrong." The bearded man smiled, and it transformed his intimidating face into something almost grandfatherly. "Ma'am, nobody said anything about money. Name's Jake. That's Razor, Tiny, Mouse, Diesel, Wrench, Knocker, and the kid there is Newbie. We're with the Desert Sons Henderson chapter." Sarah had heard of them. The Desert Sons weren't like the gangs you saw on TV. They were more of a brotherhood, guys who rode together, did charity runs, helped veterans. But still, accepting help from 8 bikers on a deserted highway felt like stepping off a cliff blindfolded. Jake seemed to read her hesitation. "Look, I got 3 daughters of my own. 2 of them about your age, 1 a little older. If any of them were stuck out here, I'd hope someone would stop and help. That's all this is." Behind him, one of the other riders called out, "Jake, let me take a look at the engine. Might be something simple." The one who'd spoken was lean and tall, with tattoos covering both arms. He walked over carrying a flashlight and a tool bag that looked like it had seen 1,000 repairs. Sarah watched as he popped her hood and started examining the engine, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The others stayed by their bikes, giving her space, which she appreciated more than they probably knew. Emma stirred in the back seat, making a small whimpering sound. Sarah turned immediately, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. Honey, it's okay. We just stopped for a minute. Emma's eyes opened slowly, confused and scared. Mommy, where are we? Who are those men? They're helping us, baby. Our car broke down, but these nice men are going to help fix it. Even as she said it, Sarah wasn't sure she believed it. But what else could she tell her daughter? That she was terrified? That they were trapped and vulnerable? No. She had to be strong, had to project confidence even when she felt nothing but fear. The mechanic, Wrench apparently, called out from under the hood. Your alternator belts snapped clean through. That's why everything died. I can jury-rig something to get you to town, but it won't hold for long. Maybe 20 miles if you're lucky. 20 miles would get them to Boulder City. There was an all-night truck stop there. Safety. Witnesses. Other people. How long will it take? Sarah asked. Give me 15 minutes. I got some spare parts on my bike that might work. Sarah watched him work, watched the others standing guard almost protectively around her car. One of them, the youngest one they called Newbie, was walking the shoulder with a flashlight, checking for something. When he came back, she heard him tell Jake that there were fresh tire tracks leading off into the desert about 100 yards back. Jake's expression darkened. He walked over to Sarah's window again. Ma'am, I don't want to scare you, but you made the right choice accepting our help. That's a spot where some bad folks have been pulling people over, pretending to be broke down themselves. When good Samaritans stop to help, they rob them. Sometimes worse. Sarah's blood ran cold. She thought about what could have happened if the bikers hadn't come along. If someone else had stopped instead. If she'd gotten out of the car to try to walk for help. Thank you, she whispered, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Jake nodded. We take care of our own out here. And right now, you're under our protection. The words should have sounded threatening, but somehow they felt like a shield. Sarah found herself relaxing slightly, her death grip on the steering wheel loosening. Emma was fully awake now, peering out the window with wide eyes. Mommy, why do they have pictures on their jackets? Those are called patches, honey. They show what group they belong to. Like Girl Scouts? Sarah almost laughed despite everything. Kind of like that, yes. One of the bikers, the enormous one they called Tiny ironically, walked over. He was holding something. He knelt down so he was at Emma's eye level through the window and held up a stuffed toy. A small motorcycle with a teddy bear riding it. Hey there, little lady. Thought you might like this. My granddaughter left it in my saddlebag last week. Emma looked at Sarah for permission. Sarah found herself nodding, and Emma carefully rolled down her window a few inches to take the toy. What do you say, Emma? Thank you, mister. You're very welcome. And don't you worry about nothing. We're gonna get you and your mama home safe tonight. The simple kindness of the gesture made Sarah's eyes burn with unexpected tears. She'd been holding it together, staying strong. But that small act of compassion toward her daughter cracked something inside her. Wrench called out from the engine. All right, I got it patched. It's not pretty, but it'll get you to Boulder City. You're gonna want to get a real mechanic to look at it first thing tomorrow, though. This is just a temporary fix. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Jake pulled out his wallet and handed her 2 $20 bills through the window. For the mechanic tomorrow. Don't argue. Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better. But that car needs proper fixing, and I'm guessing you're already stretched thin. Sarah wanted to refuse. Pride demanded she refuse. But looking at Emma, thinking about getting to work tomorrow, thinking about keeping a roof over their heads, she took the money with shaking hands. I'll pay you back. Promise. Where can I send it? Jake waved her off. You see someone else who needs help someday, you help them. That's how you pay it back. The bikers mounted their motorcycles, and Jake gave final instructions. We're gonna escort you to Boulder City. You stay between us, match our speed. If something goes wrong, if the car dies again, you flash your hazards and we stop. Got it? Got it. The engines roared to life, and suddenly Sarah and Emma were in the middle of a protective cocoon of motorcycles. For in front, for behind, moving through the darkness like a well-trained unit. Emma was fascinated, her fear completely replaced by excitement. Mommy, this is so cool. Wait until I tell my class. Sarah drove carefully, watching the temperature gauge, praying the temporary fix would hold. Every mile that passed was a victory. Every minute closer to safety was a gift. She thought about the assumptions she'd made when she first saw them. The fear. The prejudice. How wrong she'd been. These men, these rough-looking bikers who society probably judged as harshly as they judged her for being a struggling single mom, had shown more kindness than most people ever did. The lights of Boulder City appeared on the horizon like a beacon, and Sarah felt something in her chest release. They were going to make it. Her daughter was safe. They were both going to be okay. The truck stop was bright and busy even at 3 in the morning. The bikers pulled in behind her, and Jake came to her window one more time. There's a mechanic shop about 2 blocks that way. Opens at 6. Guy named Tommy runs it. Tell him Jake from the Desert Sons sent you. He'll treat you fair. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face now. I don't know how to thank you. You saved us tonight. You really did. Jake smiled, that grandfatherly expression back on his face. Sometimes angels wear leather instead of wings. Ma'am, you take care of that beautiful little girl. And remember what I said, you pay it forward. They drove off then, their engines fading into the distance, and Sarah sat in the bright parking lot of the truck stop with Emma chattering excitedly beside her about the adventure they'd just had. Sarah pulled out her phone. Signal. Blessed signal. She called her boss at the diner, explained she'd be late, explained what happened. Then she called the one friend she had in Henderson, asked if they could sleep on her couch for a few hours before the mechanic opened. As she waited for her friend to arrive, Emma finally asked the question that had been building. Mommy, were you scared? Sarah looked at her daughter, at this perfect little human who depended on her for everything, and decided to tell the truth. Yes, baby. I was terrified. But then those men helped us, and I learned something important tonight. What? That you can't judge people by how they look. Sometimes the scariest-looking people have the kindest hearts. Tommy's Auto Repair was a small shop wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat, the kind of place Sarah would normally drive past without a second glance. But when she pulled up at 6:15 that morning, exhausted and running on truck stop coffee, Tommy himself was already there, rolling up the garage door. He was a compact man in his 50s, with grease-stained hands and kind eyes behind thick-framed glasses. Sarah barely had time to introduce herself before he held up a hand. Jake already called me, said you'd be coming by, said to take care of you like you were family. Let me take a look. Sarah hadn't expected that. Jake must have called from the road, making sure she'd be taken care of even after they'd gone their separate ways. The thoughtfulness of it made her throat tight. Emma was asleep again in the back seat, exhausted from their ordeal. Sarah stood in the early morning chill, wrapping her diner uniform cardigan tighter around herself, watching Tommy examine her car with the practiced eye of someone who'd been doing this for decades. After 20 minutes, he emerged shaking his head. Well, the good news is Wrench did a decent job getting you here. That man knows his way around an engine. Bad news is you need a new alternator, new belt, and honestly, your transmission fluid is almost black. When's the last time you had this thing serviced? Sarah felt her face flush with embarrassment. 6 months ago. Maybe 8. Tommy's expression softened. Look, I'm not judging. Jake told me a little about your situation. Single mom, working hard, doing what you can. I see it all the time. People putting off maintenance because they're just trying to survive day to day. How much is this going to cost? Tommy wrote some numbers on a pad, showed her. Sarah felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Even with the $40 Jake had given her, she was looking at a bill that would wipe out the grocery money for the next 2 weeks. Maybe 3. I can do payment plans, Tommy offered. $50 a month until it's paid off. Interest-free. Sarah did the math in her head. Even $50 a month would mean cutting something else. Maybe the internet. Emma needed it for her school assignments, but the library had computers. They could make it work. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Tommy nodded and got to work. Sarah settled into the waiting area, a cramped corner with 3 plastic chairs and old magazines. She should have been panicking about being late to work, about the money, about everything. But instead, she felt something unexpected. Gratitude. 24 hours ago, She'd been driving home from her shift, tired and worried about money like always. Now she was sitting in a mechanic's shop, alive and safe, because 8 bikers had stopped to help a stranger. The universe worked in mysterious ways. Her phone rang. Her boss, Rita. Sarah, honey, don't worry about coming in today. I called Jessica to cover your shift. You get that car fixed and get some rest. You've been through hell. Rita, I need the hours. I can't afford to miss a day. Consider it paid leave. You've worked every holiday for the past year without complaining. I owe you at least one day. Sarah felt tears threatening again. She seemed to be crying more in the past 6 hours than she had in the past 6 months. Thank you, Rita. Really. Just get yourself sorted. And Sarah? I want to hear the whole story when you come in tomorrow. Rita paused. Actually, you should write it down. Post it somewhere. People need to hear stories like this. After they hung up, Sarah sat there thinking about Rita's words. People need to hear stories like this. Maybe she was right. Maybe in a world where the news was always full of terrible things, people needed to be reminded that goodness still existed. She pulled up Facebook on her phone and started typing. Her hands were shaking, partly from exhaustion, partly from emotion, but the words poured out. Last night, I broke down on Route 95 with my 6-year-old daughter in the car. Middle of nowhere, no cell service, middle of the night. I was terrified. Then 8 bikers pulled up, and I thought my worst nightmare was coming true. Instead, they saved our lives. The Desert Sons, Henderson chapter. They fixed my car enough to get us to safety, gave me money for repairs, and escorted us to make sure we made it okay. Jake, Razor, Tiny, Mouse, Diesel, Wrench, Knocker, and Newbie, if any of you ever see this, thank you. You restored my faith in humanity. Angels really do wear leather. She posted it and put her phone away, not expecting much. Maybe a few friends would like it. Maybe her mom would comment. That was it. By the time Tommy finished the repairs 3 hours later, Sarah's phone had exploded. Her post had been shared 47 times. People were commenting, sharing their own stories of being helped by bikers, thanking the Desert Sons. Local news stations were messaging her asking for interviews. Sarah stared at her phone in disbelief. This wasn't what she'd expected at all. Tommy came into the waiting room wiping his hands on a rag. All done. She'll run smooth now. And I talked to Jake again. He said the club's got a fund for situations like this. They're covering half your repair bill. What? No, I can't accept that. Already done. Jake said you'd argue, but he said to tell you that the club does this kind of thing all the time. They do charity rides, raise money for families in need. Consider it part of their mission. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't process this level of kindness from people who owed her nothing. Tommy handed her the keys and a receipt showing a balance of $120 instead of the $400 she'd been expecting. The payment plan still stood. $25 a month. Outside, Emma was awake now, playing with the toy motorcycle Tiny had given her. Sarah buckled her in, started the car, and marveled at how smoothly it ran, like it was new again. Her phone rang as she pulled out of the parking lot. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Martinez? This is Kelly from Channel 8 News. We saw your Facebook post about the Desert Sons. We'd love to do a story about what happened. Would you be willing to come on camera? Sarah glanced at Emma in the rearview mirror. Her daughter was making the little bear do wheelies on the toy motorcycle, completely carefree despite everything they'd been through. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, I'd like that. If you're watching this story and it's touching your heart, if you believe in the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, take a moment right now and subscribe to this channel. Because what happened next, the way this one night rippled out and changed everything, that's when the real transformation began. The interview aired that evening. Sarah had gone home, showered, changed into her nicest blouse, and brought Emma to the studio. They sat on a bright blue couch while Kelly asked questions, and Sarah told the whole story. Emma chimed in with her own version, talking about how scared she'd been until Tiny gave her the toy, how the motorcycle sounded like thunder, how the bikers were like superheroes on bikes. The segment was supposed to be 3 minutes. It ran for 8. By the time it finished, Sarah's phone was ringing off the hook again. Jake called first. Sarah, you didn't have to do all this. We just did what anyone should do. That's exactly why I did it, Sarah replied. Because most people wouldn't. Most people would have driven right past us. You stopped. You helped. You cared. People need to know there's still good in the world. The news story went viral. Within 24 hours, it had been picked up by national outlets. Good Morning America wanted to fly them to New York. The Ellen Show reached out. Suddenly, Sarah and Emma's faces were everywhere, and so were the faces of the Desert Sons. The motorcycle club's local chapter was inundated with calls. People wanting to thank them. People wanting to donate to their charity fund. People wanting to join. The Henderson chapter had been 23 members strong. Within a week, they had 50 applications. But more than that, something shifted in the community. People started sharing their own stories of kindness from unexpected sources. A homeless veteran who'd returned a lost wallet with $2,000 in it. A teenage kid covered in tattoos who'd saved a toddler from running into traffic. A Muslim family who'd helped fix a flat tire for an elderly couple during Ramadan. Sarah's simple Facebook post had started a movement, a reminder that humanity was better than the headlines suggested. She went back to work at Ruby's Diner, and suddenly she was a local celebrity. Customers recognized her, wanted to hear the story firsthand. Tips doubled. The regular who'd been difficult and demanding for years suddenly became polite and generous. Her coworker Linda stopped complaining about every little thing and started looking for the good instead. Small shifts, tiny changes, but they mattered. 2 weeks after the incident, Jake came into the diner during Sarah's shift. He was with his wife, a warm woman named Patricia who hugged Sarah like they'd known each other for years. "We wanted to thank you," Jake said. "What you did, sharing that story, it's changed things for us. People see us differently now. They understand what we're really about." "You changed my life," Sarah said simply. "I was just returning the favor." 3 months after that night on Route 95, Sarah's life looked completely different, though she was still working at Ruby's Diner. The difference was, now she wanted to be there instead of feeling trapped. The viral story had brought unexpected opportunities. A local businesswoman named Catherine Brennan had seen the interview and reached out. Catherine owned a chain of family restaurants across Nevada and was looking for someone to manage community outreach and charity partnerships. Someone with heart, she'd said. Someone who understood what it meant to struggle and to receive help when you needed it most. The job paid twice what Sarah made at the diner, with benefits and regular hours that meant she could actually be home for dinner with Emma. Rita had thrown her a goodbye party at Ruby's, complete with a cake shaped like a motorcycle, and had cried while telling Sarah she deserved every good thing coming her way. But Sarah had asked if she could keep working 1 shift a week at the diner. Saturday mornings. Kept her grounded, kept her connected to where she'd come from. Rita had agreed instantly. The Desert Sons had become part of Sarah's extended family. Jake and Patricia invited her and Emma to their house for Sunday dinners. Tiny's granddaughter and Emma had become best friends. Wrench had taught Sarah basic car maintenance in his garage, showing her how to check her oil, change a tire, and recognize warning signs before they became emergencies. The charity fund that had helped pay for Sarah's repairs had grown exponentially. The club now helped a dozen families a month with everything from car repairs to medical bills to grocery money. Sarah helped coordinate it all through her new position with Catherine's company, creating a partnership that fed donations directly where they were needed most. Emma had thrived too. The attention had faded after a few weeks, and she'd gone back to being a normal 6-year-old. But something had changed in her. She was more confident, more outgoing. She'd started a kindness club at her elementary school, inspired by what the bikers had done for them. Every Friday, the kids did something nice for someone else. Small things. Sharing lunch, helping someone with homework, leaving encouraging notes in library books. Sarah's parents had finally met Jake and the others at a barbecue the club hosted for the families they'd helped. Her father, who'd been skeptical about the whole thing, had spent 2 hours talking motorcycles with Diesel and had left saying those are good men. Her mother had cried, hugged Jake, and thanked him for protecting her baby girl. Life was good. Better than it had been in years. Sarah had even started dating again, something she'd thought impossible with her schedule and responsibilities. A nice teacher named Marcus who Emma adored, who didn't mind that Sarah came as a package deal, who thought her story was inspiring instead of baggage. But the biggest change had come from within Sarah herself. She'd spent so many years just surviving, just getting through each day, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to actually live, to have hope, to believe things could get better. Then came the phone call that changed everything again. Sarah was at the Desert Sons Clubhouse, a converted warehouse where they held meetings and community events, helping organize a toy drive for Christmas. Her phone rang and she almost ignored it, but the area code was from Los Angeles. Hello? Is this Sarah Martinez? The woman from the Route 95 story? Yes, that's me. My name is David Chin. I'm a producer with Sunrise Productions. We create documentary content for streaming platforms, and we'd like to do a longer piece about your story. Not just what happened that night, but the ripple effect it created. The movement it started. Sarah's heart started pounding. A documentary? About her? We'd want to follow you for about 3 months. David continued. Show your work with the charity, interview the Desert Sons, talk to the families you've helped. We think there's something powerful here about community, about breaking down stereotypes, about how one act of kindness can transform everything. I don't know, Sarah said slowly. Emma's been through a lot with all the attention. I don't want to put her through more. We'd be respectful of that. She doesn't have to be involved if you don't want her to be. But Sarah, this story is bigger than one night on a highway. It's about changing the narrative, showing people that humanity is worth believing in. Don't you think that message matters right now? Sarah looked around the warehouse. Tiny was on a ladder hanging Christmas lights. Wrench was sorting through donated toys, making sure each one worked properly. Jake was talking to a young mother who just lost her job, assuring her the club would help with groceries until she got back on her feet. Newbie, who wasn't so new anymore, was teaching a group of teenagers basic motorcycle maintenance as part of a youth mentorship program they'd started. This was what good looked like. This was what community meant. Okay, she said. Let's do it. The documentary crew arrived 2 weeks later. They were a small team, just David, a cinematographer named Lisa, and a sound engineer called Marcus, different from her boyfriend Marcus, which caused some initial confusion and lots of jokes. They filmed everything. Sarah at her new job coordinating charity partnerships. The Desert Sons on a toy run, 50 motorcycles strong, riding through Henderson with bags of gifts for children's hospitals. Emma's Kindness Club at school. Sunday dinners at Jake's house. Tommy at his repair shop, talking about how business had tripled after the news story because people wanted to support a mechanic who worked with the Desert Sons. But the most powerful footage came from the families they'd helped. A single father whose car had broken down and been repaired through the fund, who'd been able to keep his job because of it. An elderly veteran who'd needed medical equipment the VA couldn't provide. A teenager who'd been homeless and was now living in a transitional housing program the club had helped establish. Story after story of people helping people. Of community showing up when it mattered most. 6 weeks into filming, David sat down with Sarah for what he called the centerpiece interview. They were back on Route 95, at the exact spot where her car had broken down that night. It was sunset, the desert painted in shades of orange and purple, beautiful and haunting. Tell me what was going through your mind that night, David said, before the Desert Sons showed up. Sarah took a deep breath, remembering. I thought I was going to die, or worse, that something would happen to Emma. I felt so helpless, so stupid for taking this route, for not getting the car fixed sooner, for all the choices that led to that moment. I was angry at myself, terrified for my daughter, and completely alone. And then I heard the motorcycles and my fear changed. It wasn't fear of the situation anymore. It was fear of the people coming to help. I made assumptions based on how they looked, what I'd been taught to believe about people like them. I was wrong about everything. What did you learn? Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from the camera. I learned that angels don't always look like we expect them to. I learned that community isn't about living in the same place. It's about showing up for each other. I learned that one moment of kindness can save more than a life, can save a soul. Mine was dying that night, suffocating under all the weight of just trying to survive. Jake and his brothers didn't just fix my car. They reminded me that people are good, that life is worth living, that asking for help isn't weakness. The interview ran for 2 hours. Sarah told them everything. About Emma's father leaving. About the shame she'd felt being a single mother struggling to make ends meet. About the isolation of poverty, how it makes you feel invisible and worthless. About how close she'd been to just giving up, to accepting that life would always be hard and hope was for other people. About how that night had shattered her despair and rebuilt her from the ground up. When filming wrapped 3 months later, David told her it was the most moving project he'd ever worked on. The documentary, titled Angels in Leather, premiered at Sundance Film Festival 7 months after that night on Route 95. It won the Audience Award for Documentary Features. Sarah and Jake walked the red carpet together. Emma wore a dress covered in tiny motorcycles. The Desert Sons came in full colors, leather vests proudly displayed, standing tall and dignified as the crowd applauded them. The film was picked up by Netflix and released worldwide 3 months later. Suddenly, Sarah's story wasn't just local news. It was global. Messages poured in from every continent. People sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness. Motorcycle clubs from other countries reaching out to the Desert Sons to learn about their charity work. Communities starting their own pay-it-forward movements. A year after breaking down on that dark highway, Sarah stood on a stage at a TED conference in Vancouver, telling her story to thousands of people. She talked about judgment and grace, about fear and faith, about how sometimes the people society tells us to fear are exactly the ones we need most. The applause was deafening. But what mattered more were the individual voices after, the people who came up to her saying, "You changed my life," saying, "I'm going to do better," saying, "Thank you for reminding me what matters." The foundation was Sarah's idea, but it took a village to make it real. 18 months after that night on Route 95, the Angels on Wheels Foundation officially launched with a mission statement that brought tears to Sarah's eyes every time she read it. Breaking down barriers through kindness, one roadside rescue at a time. Catherine Brennan had offered seed funding. The Desert Sons provided the manpower and expertise. Sarah coordinated everything from a small office in Henderson that used to be an insurance agency. Emma had helped pick out the furniture, insisting they needed a couch because people who are asking for help shouldn't have to sit in hard chairs. The foundation did 3 things. First, it provided emergency roadside assistance and car repairs for families who couldn't afford them. Second, it trained and coordinated motorcycle clubs across the country to do community outreach and charity work. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it created mentorship programs pairing at-risk youth with bikers who'd turned their own lives around. Jake had retired from his construction job and now ran the foundation full-time alongside Sarah. Patricia managed the volunteer coordination. Wrench oversaw the mechanic training program they'd established, teaching young people automotive skills while giving them purpose and belonging. Tommy's shop had expanded into 3 locations. He'd hired 4 new mechanics, all of them graduates of the Foundation's training program, kids who'd been written off by society, given a second chance and the skills to build a real future. The documentary's success had opened doors Sarah never imagined possible. She'd been invited to speak at conferences, on news programs at colleges and community centers. Every time, she told the same story, drove home the same message. Don't judge people by their appearance. Give kindness freely. We're all one bad day away from needing help. But the speaking engagements and the foundation work, as meaningful as they were, weren't what brought Sarah the most joy. It was the individual moments, the small victories, like Marcus, her boyfriend, proposing on the anniversary of that night on Route 95. He'd arranged for the Desert Sons to escort them back to that exact spot on the highway, where he'd set up a canopy with lights and flowers. Emma had been in on the plan, had squealed with delight when Sarah said yes. They'd gotten married 6 months later in a ceremony that mixed traditional elements with motorcycle tradition. The Desert Sons had formed an honor guard with their bikes, and instead of throwing rice, guests had rung bells for good luck. Like Emma, now 8 years old, starting a YouTube channel with Jake called Kindness Kids where they interviewed people doing good in their communities. The channel had 500,000 subscribers. Emma handled it with the same confident grace she approached everything now, This child who'd once been so shy and uncertain. Like Newbie, who wasn't new anymore at all. Becoming a certified EMT and starting a program teaching first aid to motorcycle clubs across the Southwest. He told Sarah that saving her that night had shown him his purpose. Now he was saving others, both literally and figuratively. Like the letter Sarah received from a woman in Sweden who'd seen the documentary and decided to start a similar program in Stockholm. Or the motorcycle club in Japan that had adopted their model. Or the community in rural Australia that had created their own roadside assistance program for stranded travelers. The ripples kept spreading, wider and wider, touching shores Sarah had never even imagined. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came 2 years after that night, when Sarah received a call from a woman named Jennifer. Jennifer's voice was shaking when she introduced herself. "I saw your TED Talk. I need to tell you something. My husband is in prison. He made terrible choices, got involved with drugs, hurt people. Our daughter is 5. I've been raising her alone, working 3 jobs, and yesterday my car broke down on the interstate. I was terrified. But then I remembered your story, and I called your foundation instead of panicking. 2 bikers from a club in Phoenix came and helped us. They fixed the car, made sure we got home safe, and they were so kind to my little girl. She told me last night that maybe not all big scary men are bad. Maybe some of them are angels." Jennifer paused, crying openly now. "You don't understand what that means. Her father's actions, they traumatized her. She's been terrified of men, won't let anyone get close. But these bikers, they were gentle and patient, and something shifted in her. For the first time in a year, she smiled at a man without fear. You did that. Your story created that moment." Sarah was crying too. "That's not me. That's the community we built together. That's people choosing to be better. But you started it. You shared your story when you could have just moved on with your life. You turned your trauma into purpose." After they hung up, Sarah sat in her office for a long time, thinking about purpose and trauma and the strange way the universe worked. She'd broken down on a dark highway, terrified and alone. And somehow that moment of desperation had become the catalyst for changing thousands of lives. The foundation had helped over 2,000 families in its first 2 years. They'd trained 50 motorcycle clubs in community outreach. They'd placed 137 young people in jobs through their mentorship program. They'd partnered with 23 states to provide emergency roadside assistance. But more than the numbers, it was the shift in perception. People looked at bikers differently now. They saw the patches and the leather and the intimidating appearance, and instead of fear, they felt hope, safety, community. The Desert Sons Henderson chapter had grown to 140 members. They met twice a month at the warehouse, but it wasn't just bikers anymore. Families came. Community members volunteered. It had become a hub for the neighborhood, a place where anyone could find help or offer it. Jake's house, where Sarah and Emma had dinner every Sunday, had become a gathering place for what Jake called their extended family. Sometimes 20 people showed up. Veterans, single parents, kids from the mentorship program, bikers, mechanics, teachers, nurses. A beautiful mix of humanity breaking bread together. Sarah's mother had started volunteering at the foundation 3 days a week. Her father had joined the Desert Sons as an honorary member and rode in all their charity events on a bike Jake had helped him restore. Her siblings, who'd once thought she was crazy for working with a motorcycle club, now volunteered regularly. Even Emma's father had reached out after seeing the documentary. He'd gotten sober, was working in a rehab center, wanted to apologize and maybe be part of Emma's life if Sarah and Emma were willing. Sarah had been angry at first, protective, but Emma had surprised her by wanting to meet him. They were taking it slow, supervised visits with Marcus present. But Emma had inherited Sarah's capacity for forgiveness and grace. Marcus had adopted Emma officially 6 months after the wedding. The Desert Sons had thrown a party that rivaled the wedding itself. Emma now had 2 fathers, one who was learning to be better and one who'd chosen to love her unconditionally. She told anyone who'd listen that she was the luckiest kid in the world. On the 2-year anniversary of that night on Route 95, the foundation held a celebration at the warehouse. Over 500 people showed up. Families they'd helped, volunteers, donors, community members, media, politicians who'd started supporting legislation for more accessible roadside assistance programs. Sarah stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. 2 years ago, I was broken down and broken inside. I'd lost hope. I'd forgotten what it meant to be part of something bigger than myself. Then 8 bikers stopped to help a stranger, and everything changed. She looked at Jake, standing with Patricia and his daughters. At Tiny, holding his granddaughter on his shoulders. At Wrench, surrounded by his mechanics in training. At all the Desert Sons, these men who'd been judged and dismissed by society, who'd proven that character had nothing to do with appearance. We've helped thousands of people through this foundation. But really, you all helped me first. You showed me that rock bottom can be a foundation if you let it be. That our worst moments don't define us unless we let them. That kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing we have. The crowd erupted in applause, but Sarah wasn't finished. So here's what I want to say to anyone watching this, anyone hearing this story. You have the power to be someone's angel. You don't need wings or a halo. You just need to stop when you see someone who needs help. You need to look past your assumptions and see the person underneath. You need to believe that people are worth saving, worth fighting for, worth loving. Because they are. We all are. Emma came up on stage then, carrying a plaque. She handed it to Sarah, who read it through tears. It was from the city of Henderson, declaring this day Angels on Wheels Day, honoring the Desert Sons and the foundation for their community service. Jake joined them on stage and Sarah handed him the plaque. This belongs to you, to all of you. You started this. We just helped it grow. Jake hugged her, this grandfather figure who'd become family, and whispered so only she could hear, "No, Sarah. You started this when you had the courage to accept help. When you turned your gratitude into action. When you decided one good deed deserved 1,000 more. That's all you, darling. That's all you." 5 years later, Sarah stood in the parking lot of Ruby's Diner, waiting for her Saturday morning shift to start. Some things, she'd decided long ago, were worth keeping even when life changed dramatically. This weekly shift was her anchor, her reminder of where she'd come from and how far she'd traveled. Emma was 13 now, taller than Sarah and still growing. She sat in the passenger seat of their reliable Honda, the one the foundation had helped them buy 3 years ago when the old car finally gave up for good, doing homework on a tablet. The YouTube channel had evolved into a podcast called Real Talk with Emma and Jake, where they interviewed people making a difference in their communities. It had won a Webby Award last year. Marcus pulled up in his truck, waving. He taught history at Henderson High now and coached the debate team. Emma was on that team naturally. Sarah's daughter had inherited her mother's gift for storytelling and her stepfather's love of persuasive argument. She was formidable. Their son, 3-year-old Christopher, was in the back seat of Marcus's truck, probably covered in breakfast as usual. They'd named him after Jake's middle name, a tribute to the man who'd changed all their lives. Jake had cried when they told him, this tough biker reduced to tears by the honor. "How's my favorite ladies?" Marcus called out, climbing out of the truck. "Good. Emma's finishing homework. I'm about to sling hash and eggs. Life is perfect." Marcus kissed her, the kind of kiss that still made her heart flutter after 7 years together. Some people searched their whole lives for love like this. Sarah had found it after believing she never would. "Jake's planning something for the anniversary next month," Marcus said. "Won't tell me what, but Patricia says it's big. The 7-year anniversary of that night." Sarah couldn't believe it had been that long. So much had changed, and yet the core of who she was remained the same. Still grateful, still determined to pay it forward, still amazed by the goodness of ordinary people. The Angels on Wheels Foundation now operated in 42 states with over 300 partner motorcycle clubs. They'd helped more than 50,000 families. The mentorship program had placed over 2,000 young people in careers. They'd started a scholarship fund that had sent 97 kids to college, kids who never thought higher education was possible. But numbers didn't capture the real impact. The lives changed, the hope restored, the communities transformed. Sarah's speech circuit had grown. She'd spoken at the United Nations about grassroots community building. She testified before Congress about poverty and support systems. She'd been featured on 60 Minutes, in Time magazine, on NPR. The little girl from a crowded apartment in Henderson who'd once thought she'd never amount to anything was now considered an expert on social change. Yet every Saturday morning, she put on her Ruby's Diner uniform and served coffee and pancakes to locals who'd known her when. Rita had retired 2 years ago and given Sarah partial ownership of the diner. Sarah had made only one change: a wall of photos showing community members helping each other. Above it, a sign read, "Be someone's angel today." Her shift that morning was busy. The usual regulars, plus some tourists who'd heard about the diner from the documentary and wanted to see where Sarah worked. She didn't mind. If her story brought business to Rita's legacy, that was another kind of paying it forward. During her break, she checked her phone. A text from Jake. "Need you at the warehouse at 2 p.m. Important. Bring the family." Sarah smiled. Whatever Jake was planning, it would be meaningful. Everything he did was. At 2 o'clock, Sarah, Marcus, Emma, and Christopher pulled up to the warehouse. It looked different. Balloons everywhere. A banner stretched across the entrance. 7 Years of Angels. Inside it was packed. Not just the Desert Sons, though they were all there, but hundreds of people. Families the foundation had helped. Volunteers, donors, and cameras. Professional cameras. Sarah's heart started pounding. What's going on? Jake stepped forward, grinning like he had a secret. "Sarah Martinez, 7 years ago you broke down on a highway. Today we're celebrating not just that night, but everything that came after. But first we have some surprises." A screen lowered from the ceiling, and a video began to play. It was a compilation of testimonials. Person after person, faces Sarah recognized and some she didn't, talking about how the foundation had changed their lives. How a roadside rescue had led to a job opportunity. How a mentorship had saved a kid from gang life. How seeing bikers helping people had changed someone's prejudices and made them a better person. 20 minutes of pure emotion. Sarah was crying before the first minute ended. Then the screen went dark, and David Chun, the documentary producer, stepped forward. "Sarah, when we made Angels in Leather 7 years ago, I thought that was the end of the story. But I was wrong. The story kept growing. So we've been secretly filming for the past year, creating a sequel. Angels in Leather, The Movement, premieres on Netflix next month." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "You didn't. We did. And it's even better than the first one because now we have years of impact to show. We followed 20 families you've helped. We interviewed motorcycle clubs across the country. We documented the scholarship recipients and where they are now. Sarah, you've created something that's going to outlive all of us." Jake took the microphone next. "But that's not all. Sarah, you've been working out of that little office for 5 years. It's cramped, it's outdated, and frankly, it's not big enough for what the foundation has become. So we bought you a building." "What?" "The old community center on Boulder Highway. The city was going to tear it down, but we bought it, renovated it, and turned it into the official headquarters of the Angels on Wheels Foundation. 5,000 square feet. Offices, meeting rooms, a mechanic training bay, a community space, everything you need." Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The magnitude of it was too much. Patricia came forward with Emma. "And Emma, sweetie, you've been using your bedroom to record your podcast. That's not professional. So in the new building, there's a full production studio. For you and Jake and whatever projects you dream up next." Emma's eyes went wide. "Are you serious? Grandpa Jake, is this real?" Jake had become Grandpa Jake to both Emma and Christopher over the years, and he wore the title with pride. "It's real, sweet girl. You've earned it." Then the back doors of the warehouse opened, and people started filing in. More people than Sarah thought could fit, and she recognized faces from the past. Tommy, now running 6 mechanic shops across Nevada. Jennifer, the woman who'd called years ago about her daughter, now a volunteer coordinator for the Foundation's West Coast operations. Wrench's former students, now professional mechanics themselves. Kids from the mentorship program, now adults with careers and families. And in the back, supported by his daughter, Emma's biological father. He'd been sober for 5 years, worked as a counselor at the same rehab center that had saved him. He caught Sarah's eye and mouthed thank you. She nodded. Forgiveness had been hard, but it had freed both of them. The celebration lasted hours. Music, food, stories, laughter. Christopher rode on Tiny's shoulders while Tiny's great-grandchildren chased each other around. Emma and her podcast co-host interviewed people about what the foundation meant to them. Marcus stood with his arm around Sarah, anchoring her through the overwhelming emotion of it all. As the sun set, Jake pulled Sarah aside. They stood in the doorway of the warehouse, looking out at the parking lot full of motorcycles and cars and people loading up to leave. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Jake asked. "What?" 7 years ago, I was just an old biker who liked to help people. Now I'm part of something that's going to change the world. You did that, Sarah. You took what we gave you and multiplied it 1,000 times over. We did it together. All of us. Jake nodded. Yeah. We did. And that's what makes it beautiful. None of us could have done this alone. But together we're unstoppable. Sarah looked at the scene before her. Emma laughing with a group of teenagers from the mentorship program. Marcus holding Christopher, teaching him to wave goodbye to people. Patricia organizing volunteers for next week's toy drive. Tiny and his family loading up bikes. Former recipients of help now giving it to others. This was legacy. Not money or fame or awards, though those had come. Legacy was the ripples that kept spreading long after the initial splash. It was changed lives changing other lives. It was a movement that would continue long after she was gone. 7 years ago, I just wanted to make it home alive, Sarah said quietly. Now I'm home in a way I never expected. Home isn't a place. It's people. It's community. It's belonging. Jake hugged her. Welcome home, daughter. Welcome home. As they drove away that night, Emma asked the question that had been on her mind. Mom, what do you think would have happened if the Desert Suns hadn't stopped that night? Sarah thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know, baby. Maybe someone else would have helped. Maybe we would have figured it out. But I don't think any of this, she gestured broadly, encompassing everything they built, would have happened. Sometimes the universe puts exactly the right people in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we're smart enough to recognize the gift and brave enough to pay it forward. Emma smiled, wise beyond her 13 years. I'm glad you were both smart and brave, Mom. Me too, baby. Me too. The lights of Henderson twinkled ahead of them, home in every sense of the word. And somewhere out on Route 95, under a desert sky full of stars, another traveler might be breaking down, might be scared, might be losing hope. And somewhere, angels in leather were riding through the night, ready to prove once again that humanity was worth believing in.